What's up everybody? Chris here, Power Company Climbing. I'm in the machine shop today to talk a little about contact strength. For every quality in our climbing that we try to improve, there's a list of exercises that we could choose from in order to improve that quality. How do we choose? In my mind, all of those exercises exist on a continuum of sorts. At one end is the ability to be easily measured and isolate individual actions. And at the other end is less measurable, but far more transfer to sport. And it's a series of complex interactions rather than an isolated action. And as we know, climbing, even in a single move, is a series of complex interactions in order to make that move work. And I want to look at a bunch of those exercises in this continuum, where they fit in measurability and in transfer to sport. Contact strength is a term used pretty much only by climbers. It refers to the rate of force development in the finger flexors. What that means is simply how fast can you apply the necessary force to a hold before you fall away from it. But that might be oversimplifying it. In reality, in practice, contact strength is, can you believe you can do the move, commit to the move, time it correctly, hit the hold at the same time as you're creating tension through the rest of your body, potentially driving through that little foot that needs to stay on for you to do the move, and develop force in the finger flexors at the same time. So it's a complex interaction of movements that makes contact strength work ultimately when you're climbing. Now, there's not much climbing specific research on force production in the finger flexors. There is a little bit, there is some evidence saying that heavy hangs will also increase the rate of force production, which makes sense. There's also a little bit of evidence saying that grip position may not matter so much when training your contact strength. I'm not totally sold on that. However, we do know that we don't need to worry too much about the full crimp when it comes to rate of force development. We're not hitting things extended, hitting things fast in the full crimp position. What we should be training, however, is the open hand, the open crimp, potentially even the half crimp when it comes to rate of force development. We want to be able to hit things quickly in that open hand position and then pull it into the half crimp or into the full crimp or whatever grip it is that you're going to be using for that particular hold. So if you're not strong in those open hand positions, it might benefit you to gain some strength there first. We have to have strength in order to increase our power. And the rate of force development essentially is power in the fingers. How fast can you create force? There's also some evidence in the world of general weightlifting that the intent to move quickly might be just as, or in some cases more important than a specific loading scheme or specific protocol. So especially in the case of climbing where the amount of speed we need to create force on a hold is going to vary depending on the move, then it might be that the intent is more important. Some of you may already be familiar with the force velocity curve. It's simply a chart that shows a hyperbolic curve stating that there's an inverse relationship between force and velocity. As force gets greater, velocity slows down. As velocity gets greater, force is lessened. We often see the force velocity curve divided into zones that represent different levels of power, from max strength to max speed. And the most common is something like you see here, split into 5 zones. And the entire goal is to move this curve to the right, representing that we've developed the ability to create more force faster. Now, in order to move the curve to the right without sacrificing strength for velocity or vice versa, we need to be training in each of the zones along the curve. And this graph is often used for jumping, throwing, or sprinting, movements that create displacement. So it's a little tougher to visualize with force development in the finger flexors because there's no displacement to see. Let's look at two distinctly different boulders and how I perceive each individual move as I latch the hold to fit onto this curve. Obviously, this isn't going to be exact, but if you look at the image in the bottom right, you can see where it feels like I'm landing on this curve for each move. I'm in the middle of the crux here, 3-move sequence, and you can see that it starts strength-based, and for the last move, goes to a faster rate of force development. This is pretty typical of climbing. It bounces back and forth. It's tempting to think that for every crux move, we should just be producing as much force as possible, but particularly when it's a positional crux, this isn't the case. So you can see a couple of things here. Number one, we're regularly developing force at different velocity profiles, and we should probably be working within those zones while training. Number two, climbing might actually be a really convenient way to hit all of those force velocity zones. Now, this doesn't mean we shouldn't try to isolate our specific needs in order to more effectively move that curve to the right. So let's take a look at a few of the exercises that we can do to target contact strength depending on your available time, your available equipment, and depending on what you need in order to reach your goals. So first, let's talk about the velocity no hang. I've also heard this called the velocity pull. I'm not a fan of that term simply because I don't want to confuse it with a ballistic or a velocity-based pull-up. So the velocity no hang uses a no hang device like I've got here, the tension block, and it needs to be attached to an immovable point. I've got mine attached to my ceiling. It could be to an immovable weight. It could just be looped around your foot and pulling on it. Now, we get even less specific if we have our shoulder pointed down so that we're not in a hanging position. This is a little more specific to climbing just because of the arm position. I'm getting the bicep involved a little bit. I'm getting the shoulder involved a little bit. This is more easily measured. It isolates the finger flexors for the most part. And if you have a Tendec device or a G-strength or something to that effect, you can measure your rate of force development. Now, you can also change the difficulty by changing the edge size. And all we're looking to do here is to pull quickly. Remember, intent to move quick is really important here. So all I'm going to do is get set up, get nestled into the edge, and I'm going to quickly produce force. Hold that for just a few seconds, rest about 10 seconds, and repeat. And changing the difficulty of the edge size is going to put you in different spots on that force velocity curve. That's really all there is to it. If you can measure where you're at, you can determine where you are on that force velocity curve. And we want to be able to hit all of those points on that curve when we're actually climbing. So it's up to you to determine where on that curve you want to be if you're using these types of measurements. Next, let's talk about the velocity hang. Also an option where you don't need a lot of equipment. You will need a hangboard, a campus rung, some strip of wood that you can hang on. And again, if you're going to alter the load that you're using, you're going to either need weight or a smaller edge or both. Now, there's a little more specificity to this simply because you're in a hang. You have your shoulders in a position overhead. And we've seen through comparison of the data that a no-hang device just in a static pull and how much we can hang don't exactly correlate one-to-one. Whatever the reason is, I'm not sure, but we do know that's the case. So hanging from an edge might be a little more specific than just pulling on an edge. It's also nearly as measurable. You can add weight, You can change the edge size, and I have seen some hangboards, though they are more expensive, harder to come by, that measures the rate of force development. Latch has an edge that allows you to do this. I've seen one in my friend Lee Cossey's training space, a homemade version. There's some debate, however, as to whether the rate coding on any of these devices is fast enough to really give us the information that we need. So again, we're back to intent to move quickly. What this looks like in practice is simply choosing your edge size, and rather than nestling your fingers in perfectly and then slowly loading the hang, what we're going to do is get set up just above it and not really drop our weight onto it, but latch it quickly. We could do the same with a smaller edge, and it's certainly going to feel a little harder. And it's up to you to decide where on that force velocity curve you are. For a smaller edge for me, I'm definitely getting closer to the strength side of things because I have to move a little slower. I can't latch that hold nearly as quickly as I can a big hold that I'm comfortable on. You can also get more specific here by the position of your arm. If you're stretched out overhead, that's certainly going to be more like a move, that you're doing a giant move and trying to latch a distant hold. It can be that you're really wide and you can be in this position. That's going to get your shoulders much more involved. There's all sorts of ways that we can change this to make it a little more specific, which is always going to transfer better to our climbing. We can trend a little more toward the requirements of our sport with a grip-specific velocity hang. Now, you don't need an entire bouldering wall to do this. You could do this with any of those boards that you're putting your own holds onto. And this simply just gets a little more specific because it changes the orientation of the fingers. It might split them up. It orients your wrists differently, your shoulders differently, and depending on whether you're using a board big enough to get into different shoulder positions, it's going to change things pretty dramatically. So we don't only need contact strength for edges, and that's what we're getting on a hang board or a no-hang device in most cases. We also need it for grabbing pinches, grabbing slopers, anything that we're going to be contacting really fast. We need to have the ability to create that force quickly. So why can't I choose a couple of pinches on my wall or on my board and do the exact same thing with those? So quick intent to move quickly and hold for just a few seconds with maximal force, rest, repeat. This way you're starting to create tension through your entire shoulder girdle quickly in positions more like rock climbing, and that's going to transfer better to climbing. Many of us have seen the campus board jump and latch, probably on Kyra Condi's Instagram account. She's a master at this. Now, when we see Kyra do it, she's often doing it one arm, jumping off the ground, latching one edge above her head. That's a little bit more advanced, and for most folks, that's going to be a hold that's large enough that the shoulder is really getting worked, but our finger flexors aren't quite as much. The hold's going to be big enough that we're still working our contact strength, we're still latching it, but not in the same context as hard rock climbing. So I prefer to keep the lower hand on. That's a little more specific to the coordination of rock climbing. Now, in Kyra's case, where she's able to jump and latch one-handed, that may very well carry over coordination and timing-wise better to World Cup style boulders, where that's something that's going to be happening more often. However, in real rock climbing, we don't see it nearly as often as we do in World Cup boulders. So for me, I like to keep one hand on. The tension it creates between my shoulders, the little bit of help with the timing, the transference of pulling hard from the low hand to latching with the high hand, those are all things that are going to be a little more specific and translate into your rock climbing a little better. Now, the same as with the hang, we can make this jump and latch a little more specific by using different grips, different shoulder positions, different directions for the hold. So if I want to gain contact strength for grabbing a sloper at a distance, why can't I practice it this way? That's going to prepare my shoulders, the tension created. It's going to prepare me to time it better when I'm grabbing a sloper out to the side, much better than the jump and latch exercise on the campus board will. Anytime we're moving onto the bouldering wall or moving into a space where we're using different holds, it's going to get tougher to measure. Not only can we not necessarily measure the rate of force development, but we don't have progressive sizes of the exact same hold to make changes and put us at different spots on that force velocity curve. Instead, we have to use our intuition a little bit. So as we're getting more specific, we're also getting a little less measurable. There's also a component of precision that happens with contact strength, especially as we apply it in climbing. Oftentimes you have to hit a hold just right. There could be a little hood guarding the hold that you can't get into. And you need to be able to create tension to slow that down at the last moment and then latch the hold as you're hitting it. We can practice that in this scenario as well. If you have a hold that happens to be blocked, for instance, this sloper is blocked a little by the hold above it, so I can very easily practice my precision there. So I have to consider getting into the hold precisely as well as latching it at that specific second that I get there. The campus board and campus laddering in general have long been used as this catch-all for gaining power in climbing and gaining contact strength. And while it can be used to gain power, and that's a whole nother video altogether, using the campus board for contact strength has to be fairly specific. You have to be using holds that are somewhat difficult for you to use and that you're not over controlling. What I mean by this is if I'm doing ladders on the medium rungs, even with no feet on, I can control them well enough that I can take the next rung really slowly. So I don't necessarily need to grab those rungs quickly. Now, I could certainly let a little of that control go, land on that rung faster. But then I'm creating this artificial thing in there that doesn't need to be there. What we end up doing is making bigger and bigger moves so that we're latching the rungs faster and faster. And that does work to a degree. However, going to a smaller rung and doing smaller moves is going to be safer. It's likely going to transfer to climbing better, and what that size rung is and size move is entirely depends on you and your abilities. So let's take a look at a couple of different variations of campus ladders that I like to use for contact strength. First up, the simple basic ladder. This is one where we definitely need to be moving to rungs that are tough for us to control, that we can't do 159 on. That's more of a power exercise, less of a contact strength exercise. Small rungs, small moves. Next up, I really like having feet on for this exercise. Now, that's going to require that you move to an even smaller size rung in most cases if we're looking for contact strength. But it does make it more specific in that I'm learning to time and coordinate everything, my lower body, my upper body, these dynamic moves, and latching the rung. That's going to transfer better to climbing than just laddering without your lower body. Most campus boards only go so small in their rung choices, and the small rungs from most companies are actually a pretty good hold, especially when you have your feet on or if you're a really advanced climber. So our coach, Nate Drolet, talked with Will Anglin from Tension Climbing, and together we developed the Power Strips, which are a small edge for campusing. We've kind of fit in to a couple of edges slightly smaller than the smallest campus rungs that you can get commercially. Now, for these, me personally, I like to keep my feet on and just ladder between them. It's giving me a confidence to latch tiny little edges that otherwise I just don't get on the campus board. And again, it's bringing in all of those elements of timing and coordination on these small edges. One of my favorites is a foot on 1-3 max match. And the match is debatable. You may not need it. It's not that important when we're talking about contact strength. But what we're doing here is a first move to the third rung or so, depending on your setup, and then an explosive move out of that, leaving your feet and latching a high rung. The rung should be pretty small if we're focused on contact strength. And this allows me to coordinate and time so much more that it seems like a difficult move climbing. And if you only have a campus board available, this is a really great way to get some skill transfer to your climbing. Boulder campusing, or campusing around on climbing holds, is certainly more specific than campusing on a campus board. However, it can very quickly turn into being more about power pulling than it is about contact strength. So in the context of contact strength, we want to make sure that we're doing smaller moves usually to worse holds usually. Again, it depends where you want to be on this force velocity curve. Now, I suggest, and what I find most useful, is to make up campus boulders that are specific for contact strength rather than trying to campus already existing boulders. For my money, it's generally better to mix up the hold types and to stay away from those flat edges that you can get on the campus board if you have that available to you. Short sequences, hard moves, you have to latch the holds quickly. It's definitely going to transfer to your climbing much better than the campus board will. And of course, once we put our feet on the wall while boulder campusing, it becomes indoor climbing. And indoor climbing is certainly the most specific thing you can do indoors to improve your contact strength outside. It gets all of the things involved. You're driving through your feet. You're creating tension in different positions with different size footholds, different size handholds, different grip types. There's nothing we can do indoors that's more specific to how contact strength is practiced outside. So as it stands, if you're getting in a lot of indoor climbing, powerful indoor climbing where you're having to latch holds quickly, as well as heavy hangs, you might be hitting a lot of the places on that force velocity curve already. And even though it's not super measurable on the bouldering wall, it's still going to transfer really well to your outdoor climbing. And last but not least, the absolute best thing you can do for your contact strength is going to be climbing outside. Different rock types, different levels of friction, different size footholds, different areas, different conditions. It's all going to make a difference in how all of those complex interactions come together to form the moment when you latch that hold and hang on. So by all means, get out there, go all the places you can, climb all the things. Every single time, the most specific thing we can do for our climbing, for any of these qualities of our climbing, is to practice the sport, to climb outside. So go do it. This is by no means an exhaustive list of all of the exercises you could do to improve your contact strength. Instead, it's just a way to help you make choices based on your available time, your available equipment, and what your needs actually are. It's entirely possible that if you're already doing heavy hangs and you're doing a lot of powerful bouldering, you're hitting all the spots on that force velocity curve and your contact strength is all that it needs to be. some of these exercises might help you in the event that you feel like you need a little boost in your contact strength. You've got a project where you can hit the hold, but you just can't quite hold it. You can't quite latch it. You feel like your timing is off. Maybe some of these exercises could help you. Now, ironically, the more specific you get, the closer you get to your sport, the less you actually need contact strength in a lot of the situations. If you get better at creating tension through your leg and through your core, then you don't need as much contact strength to hit that same hold as you would have otherwise. So bringing these exercises to a more specific place, closer to your sport, you're gonna be able to leverage your contact strength even better. Let me know in the comments how you feel about this kind of format, if there are other topics you'd like to see covered this way, and if you have any questions. Please share the video, hit subscribe, hit those notifications so you don't miss the next one, and I'll see you then.